Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Writer's Routine. This week we are chatting to Cathy Hayward, who is busy doing a lot of stuff. One of those things is novel writing. Her new book is The Secret of the Brighton House. We talk about why, to fit everything into her day and to find time to write, she needs to get up early and get immediately on it.
Finishing when you're halfway through a sentence or a paragraph, so it's very easy to pick up again. So I do tend to follow that advice. So the night before, I will plan what I'm going to write the following day, or even like when I finish the work at 7:15, I might finish mid-paragraph knowing where I'm going to kind of carry on the following day. And I even do that when I get up to have a coffee break. I will finish mid-sentence so that it's very easy to get back into it.
Also, you can hear why the novel was inspired by being a new mum and watching TV when she couldn't sleep.
I ended up watching a documentary about a guy who had never met his mum. She died when he was very, very small, and what happened to him. And that was a kind of similar experience to what had happened to me. But I thought, that particular documentary I thought was really fascinating, and it would be even better if I wrote it as a mother-daughter rather than mother-son relationship. I watched the documentary at about 5:30 in the morning for about 40 minutes, and that was one of the rare times that I had a free morning, and by 11 o'clock I'd written a kind of outline of what the novel could look like.
It's all on the way with Cathy Hayward in this week's Writer's Routine. This week's episode is sponsored by Faber Academy, whose flagship course, their Writing a Novel course, is back. This is the last episode of 2024, so give yourself the chance to start the new year in a brilliantly creative and productive way. If your New Year's resolution is to finally get that book finished, well, give yourself the best chance of making it happen with Faber Academy's Writing a Novel course. It's a 6-month-long programme of sessions that covers all the essentials of novel writing: character, story, structure, plotting, voice, dialogue, the whole thing. Over 150 graduates from the Writing a Novel course have gone on to secure a publication deal. Maybe you can be the next one. Through the course, you'll hear from guest speakers, some of the biggest names in publishing, authors, editors, people who have been there, who have done it, who have so much advice for you. It's designed to help you hone your craft and find direction. And at the end of the course, part of your work is sent out to agents across the UK. You'll have the chance to pitch your novel to some of the biggest names in literature as well. It teaches you more than the nuts and bolts of writing a novel. There's also the secrets of selling it. There are courses online that start from the 20th of January, and then in London too in the day or evening that start on the 28th of January. Faber Academy, they are sponsoring the show this week. Make the most of 2025. Get that novel done. Find out more about their flagship Writing a Novel course online. It's faberacademy.com/writing-a-novel. You've got the link in the episode notes wherever you're listening. This week, we're with Cathy Hayward. Now, Cathy does a lot. She runs an award-winning PR company, also runs a bookshop in Brighton that she kind of bought on a whim, and that's since become a hub of the local community. She also runs a 5 a.m. writing club, encouraging others to find their stories, and manages a creative writing programme. So there's a lot happening. In amongst it all, she's just published her second novel, which took a little while to arrive. She had a long, twisting journey to getting it out there. You can hear why in just a sec. The book is called The Secret of the Brighton House. It's all about Jackie, who always thought that her mother died in childbirth. But when she's preparing for her own much, much wanted child, she discovers something about where she came from and who her mum was that changes everything. It's a novel about trauma and history and, psychosis really, inspired by Cathy's own experience as a new mum and dealing with how that can throw every part of your life up in the air. We talk about the book and the success of her debut, The Girl in the Maze, and the strange rights issues around that, and the back end of so many different parts of being a writer, and how you never really think of that when you're just creating novels. You can hear why she writes in dual timeline and how she plans her space around that, what happens when characters develop tics, how that comes about, and what skills that she has that means she's able to do so much and still write and in the future whether she could ever find herself writing full time. It's on the way with Cathy Hayward, and we start as we always do with what she sees around her in the place where she sits down to write.
It's a very bare space that I write in. I write early in the morning, which I guess we'll talk about in a bit. But I tend to write in my sitting room, so I don't wake and disturb anybody when I get up early. And it's a really blank space. It's a very dark room. I have no lights on, so there's nothing really around me to stimulate me apart from kind of, I guess, what I'm writing about. What I do have is a corkboard. I know from listening to your podcast, lots of writers have corkboards and have pictures of all my characters and the places in which the action is set. So I kind of prop that on the sofa next to me, and I just write on the sofa with my laptop balanced on a cushion.
When did you discover that you needed to write in a very sparse, dull environment?
Well, I don't know. I think at home I have to write like that, but I can also, I write in libraries and in coffee shops sometimes as well. I think it has to be an environment where there's nothing for me to feel that I need to do. If I'm at home during the day, I will get disturbed by people. I will suddenly have a great desire to do washing and cleaning and things like that. Whereas early in the morning, it just feels very peaceful. There's no kind of stimulation outside. And I particularly like writing in the winter in the early hours of the morning because there's nobody walking down outside, and the darkness just seems to create a better place to be creative.
Talk me through your corkboard then. So you said it's got things about the places, the locations that you're writing. What kind of stuff is on there?
So I have pictures of all the characters. I tend to write stories in dual timelines. So I will have pictures of perhaps a character when they were young and when they were much older, with their names, and sometimes they've married, they've changed their name or whatever. So I have that information there. I have all the places of where the action takes place. So in the book I'm writing at the moment, it's largely set in a big country house. So I have pictures of that house from the outside, and even the floor plan, which I got from Rightmove, and pictures of some of the rooms inside. A lot of it then takes place on a train. So I've got pictures of what that particular train looks like inside. And then just other places where people go and where the action is set, just so I can kind of look at that and then visualize what it's like.
Many authors I speak to don't have that kind of stuff. They don't look at houses online. I've spoken to some authors that do like to find strange faces on Facebook to kind of help them visualize that. Why do you need to do that? What is it about having a floor plan that helps you bring this idea to life?
I think that was just me actually just getting a bit overexcited on Rightmove, because I was looking for a really big country house to set some of the action in, and this house was on the market for 4 million, and I got super excited about the idea of living there. So I don't think I actually have used the floor plan, but it's there if I needed it. And I do, obviously I have the pictures there, but I think you kind of create a slightly different image perhaps in your own mind as what's on the board. But for the people, I like to be, obviously you need to be consistent. So if I'm describing something about them, I will have, I like to look at the picture. And I also sometimes scribble notes on them about if there's a particular tic that they have, like they, I don't know, bite their lip a lot, or they wear heavy makeup, or I don't know, something like that. I might scribble that alongside just as a reminder.
Those tics, so this is getting a bit more into the process, but those tics, when is that coming to? Is that something you've definitively decided quite early on? Do you just find yourself writing and one day your character happens to bite their lip or maybe shuffle their head in a strange way?
I think it's not something that I plan. I think it comes later on. So in my book, which is coming out next, The Secret of the Brighton House, one of the characters, I suddenly felt that he had a bald head, and he was constantly kind of sweeping his hand over his kind of bald head in a bit of a nervous gesture. And he did it once. And I thought, God, that's such a thing that he would do in that really nervous situation when he's trying he's trying to keep a secret. And it kind of really stuck. To the degree that my editor then said we need to kind of stop him doing this quite so much. But so it just came to me, really. It's not something that I planned.
If it's just you and your laptop, as you know, we get like a little bit nerdy and technical. What are you writing on? What font opinions do you have?
Well, so I'm not so much about the font, although I really don't like Times New Roman, which I know everything obviously gets turned into in the end. But I do write on Scrivener, and I have written on Scrivener for, about 5 years now. And I really love it for that first draft when everything is a little bit up in the air, you don't really know what's happening, and you can kind of write scenes here and scenes there, and then character notes on something and place notes, and it just keeps everything in one place. So I always write a first draft on Scrivener, and then the time comes obviously to have to put it all into Word and send it off to my agent or my editor, and then after that I tend to just do subsequent drafts in Word, just because it's hard work then putting it back into Scrivener. So I wake up at 5, and I tend to write from 5 till about 7:15, and I do have regular breaks in there for drinks. I'm a big fan of motivating myself, doing like 40 minutes of writing and then a bit of a drinks break. And then at about 7:15, I'll wake my kids up to go to school and college, and then I go off to do the day job. And I've got a couple of day jobs. So I work as a bookseller. I also work in a PR agency and in an education establishment. So I've got the three different day jobs. And we often in the evening do evening events in the bookshop as well. So I might be working into the evening. But I do try to go to bed reasonably early, because obviously getting up at 5, it can be pretty brutal otherwise.
So many questions come from that. Waking up at 5 a.m. for most people is quite a challenge, and not just that, but getting your brain in gear. And if you're writing until 7:15, so that's, at best 2.25 hours, which is it's a good writing time. It's not the beefiest that I've heard here. How long does it take you to switch on and be in a place where you are ready to write when you're waking up at 5?
So I have kind of got better at that over the years. So I don't know who it was. I think there's quite a famous author who recommended finishing when you're halfway through a sentence or a paragraph. So it's very easy to pick up again. So I do tend to follow that advice. So the night before, I will plan what I'm going to write the following day. Or even like when I finish the work at 7:15, I might finish mid-paragraph knowing where I'm going to kind of carry on the following day. And I even do that when I get up to have a coffee break. I will finish mid-sentence, so that it's very easy to get back into it, because I find there's nothing worse than having a blank page in front of you thinking, oh my God, what am I going to write? So I find that reasonably straightforward, but it took quite a long time to get there. I used to sit in front of the blank page and kind of screw out my head and think, oh no, what am I actually supposed to be doing? So yeah, that's how I make sure that happens.
The fact that you're doing so many different things, you clearly have a brain that's good at switching between, running the bookshop or working in PR or kind of teaching creative writing. I know that's a string to your bow. Do you think that makes it handy for you when you're writing? Because I might chat to an author sometimes who, with the leisure of the day, is getting down like 1,000 words in 7 hours, and they're able to be a bit more fretful and to be a bit more worried about what they're doing, whereas you're good at getting there at 5, switching on, cracking on for 2 hours. How helpful is that for your brain?
I think it is quite helpful, and I've always been quite a busy person. And I think I do get quite a lot done. It doesn't necessarily mean it's of the greatest quality. So my first drafts tend to be, reasonably rough. But I do find if under that time pressure, I can probably write about 1,000 words in those 2 hours on a reasonable good day. I have had times when I've had the luxury of more time, like in the school holidays, and if I got time off work, and I could write till 11 o'clock, and I don't actually write any much more than that 1,000 words, and it seems to me that my brain kind of then just gets tired of the creativity, and I need to go and do something else. for a while, and I have tried to kind of get back into it, like in an afternoon. But that creativity doesn't seem to work so well later in the day. Though that being said, when I've been up against a deadline, I kind of work that I can write at any time because I'm just desperate and panicking. But for me, first thing in the morning has always worked really well. And a couple of years ago, somebody lent me the book The 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma, and he's really evangelical about getting up at 5 a.m. and what you can achieve, and that's he's a bit over the top, but actually it really worked for me as a thing, to the degree that I started doing it in the bookshop for the summer solstice in 2023. I opened up the bookshop at 5 a.m. for other writers to come and join and write with me, and it's become really popular, and we now do it once a month,
which is fantastic. And just on the 5 a.m. club, right? I enjoy the idea, as in not your 5 a.m. club, the book. I enjoy I enjoy the idea of it, and I enjoy what the author is saying with it. But I will tell you, it's the only time I've left an awful Amazon review.
Oh dear! Oh no! What did you say?
Oh, because it's just, I don't know how, in the book, maybe it gets better. I literally canned it after about 100 pages, but it was a really on the nose. It was like a GCSE English level of storytelling in how he explains these people that meet up, and they're all different characters, and they learn. And it was honest. It was like pantomime, like in how poor I thought that, and I just didn't think it was necessary. Like the novel aspect of it, just tell me what you're going to do, and that could have been done in like a pamphlet. That's what I thought anyway.
I'm totally with you there. I didn't actually finish it because I also got a bit like, I thought at one point it was going to become like some kind of Christian thing where it was all about Jesus at the end of the story, because that element of the storytelling wasn't necessary. But I really liked that idea, and he, as you say, it could have been a much shorter book, but then he wouldn't have been able to charge so much for it, I guess.
Well, there is that, yes.
But yeah, that concept of what you can achieve in that kind of, he calls like the magical hour between 5 and 6. I think that is really true for me, and it really works. But yeah, you don't need a huge hardback book to tell you that, really.
Well, let me save, if you're listening, let me save you some time. I believe he splits that magical hour into 20-minute sections, 20 minutes to do some form of exercise, 20 minutes to do a little bit of work, and 20 minutes for mindfulness. There you go. That's why you should wake up at 5 a.m. And I'm glad that you are doing that with your writing, Cathy.
I have to say, though, I don't do the 20-minute thing. I just get up and write. So
let's, on a grand scale, right? I mean, you got your fingers in a lot of pies, as we've discussed, and it would seem that you might find it tricky to give those up. So why are you getting up at 5 a.m. to write? What is it about storytelling that is drawing you to do that? Because I would think if you had the chance to be a full-time writer, well, you might find that tricky because you've got all these other things that you really enjoy doing.
I think I've always wanted to write, and I have. I had a career as a journalist before going into PR. So and in PR, I wrote a lot of content. So I was always writing, albeit in a business sense. And in my 20s, I started a lot of novels, which I've since read and were just really awful, because I had no idea kind of how to write or indeed what to write. And it was only really about 9.5 years ago, when I was coming up to my 40th birthday, and I thought, if I don't actually properly write a novel now, I'm never going to have that chance. And so then I really did focus on it. But yeah, it's always been there. I've always been a massive reader, and I always thought, well, I really, really want to do this. So I just eventually got round to putting it at the top of the to-do list and cracked on.
If you were able to be so analytical about yourself, what is it across doing the PR, running the bookshop, running the creative writing program, being an author? What is it that you're good at, do you think, that ties all those things together?
I think it's just different parts of my brain. So I really enjoy the business element of working in the PR agency, and working with clients and with the team there. I love working in a bookshop where it's a completely different sort of practical skills. Like we're cleaning, I'm making coffee, I'm choosing books and displaying them. And then with a creative writing program, it's really about helping other people to achieve the writing dream that I have. I just think they're different parts of my brain, and I only do a day and a bit a week on each of them, but it's really rewarding to do, and it keeps everything really fresh. You don't get bored of anything.
When you've been writing so early in the morning, do the impacts of that, both in being tired and in having a story floating in your brain, do they impact everything else you're doing that day?
Yeah, I think it does. I do get tired, and when I'm doing that first draft and writing at 5 a.m, I do try to slow down some of the other stuff that I'm doing. If I'm working from home on some stuff, perhaps I might have a little nap in the afternoon, because even just a 10-minute nap can really help. But I think when I'm in the editing stage, I feel I can do that at pretty much any time. So I'm not always getting up at 5 a.m.
I've chatted to authors, as I say, who, with the liberty of a whole day to write, they might go on breaks for walk. They might go on walking breaks. They might enjoy like a martini in the evening when they're writing. How much do you feel like you're missing out on some of those things because you're getting it done in a frenzy so early?
I think I definitely feel like I'm missing out on a bit on that. When I was writing my debut novel, I went down to 4 days a week at work. So I did have a day a week to write, and that's before I started getting up at 5 a.m. But even then, I felt like I was kind of trying to put a lot into one day of writing. But I was writing in the library then, and I would still have kind of walks around the block and things like that. So I got a bit of a break, but not quite the martini level of break.
It's interesting that you were doing it for that debut. So you were still writing sometimes in the week, and then doing it. You had a whole day of the week to write too.
Yes, I wasn't writing in the morning then. I would just write. I was working. I had my one PR job. I was working for, say, 4 days a week on that, and then on the Friday I would dedicate that time to the writing. So that was probably a little bit more simple than my life now, but I really enjoy working in and around books, and that's such a joy. It's worth having the kind of slightly crazy schedule to have that.
Yeah, I mean that must have been so full on, that 1 day a week when you had to get down a novel.
Yes. Yeah. No, it was. But it's kind of, I think it took me 3-4 years to write my debut novel. So it was, a lot of faffing around in that time, because obviously the first time you do anything, you don't really know what you're doing, and you're just writing into a bit of a vacuum. So it was, second and third and fourth books have been so much easier in comparison.
Well, on that then, I guess, what have you learned writing these books so far? And you're interested in the craft of it because you listen to the show. You're interested in forms of creative writing because you teach some of it yourself. So, like, what have you learned through the books about how you write best?
Well, I should say I don't teach creative writing. I run the creative writing program, but we have hugely experienced tutors who actually do the teaching. But I guess I am around that writing world a lot, which is amazing. And what I have learned is that everyone has their own way of doing it, and I think part of it is learning when you write best. And from listening to your show for many years, there are people who are early morning people. There are night owls as well, people who can only write in cafes. And I guess we have all over the years just worked out what works best for us. So that has certainly been really important for me to understand that, and also that I need a focus of a deadline. So I'm currently in contract for my next book, and I know I've got this deadline that I'm working to, and I really need that. Otherwise, I just kind of faff around and don't do the 1,000 words a day. But I guess what I've really learned is that I can really trust the process now. That the first time that I was writing, I was, you're just writing into nothing. You don't know whether it's ever going to be accepted, whether it's any good. Whereas now I kind of trust the process, that I can just keep writing, and eventually it will start to make a bit of sense.
Throwing forward to the future, if you become so successful that you're at a point where you can give, or your writing work calls for you to give it up, to give up everything else and just write full time, do you think Do you think you could ever deal with that?
Oh, gosh, I don't know which of my jobs I'd give up, though, because I really enjoy them all. So I'd have to think about that. I mean, that is the dream, isn't it? To just be able to sit down and write all day, or think about writing all day. But yeah, I'd have to think quite carefully about which of my jobs I could give up, because I love them all for their different reasons.
Back with more from Cathy in just a sec. This week's episode of the podcast is sponsored by Faber Academy. Their writing a novel course is back. Perfect to get your novel done. Perfect to get your book done in 2025. Find out more about that course in the link in the episode notes, wherever you're listening. Also, there is a way that you can support our show yourself. If you enjoy what we do and all the brilliant authors that we've brought you along the way, stuffed full of loads of tips, if you would like to support us for that and keep these episodes coming, you can do that in a couple of different ways. You can back us on a monthly basis over at patreon.com/writersroutine. On there, for just a few dollars a month, you get access to our writing community. There is merch, there is bonus content, or you could support us just as a one-off, which I am perfectly happy with and very much appreciate. Thank you very much. You can do that on Ko-Fi, ko-fi/writersroutine. Whatever you'd like, it goes an extraordinarily long way, and I really, really appreciate your help with the podcast. You can find links for both Patreon and Ko-Fi in the episode notes, wherever you're listening. So it's our last episode of 2024, and we're chatting to Cathy Hayward about her new novel, The Secret of the Brighton House. We discuss now how you try again after finishing a book that doesn't go anywhere, that just sits unread. How do you pick yourself up to start something new? Also, we run through the mechanics of how a twist happens, and we get back into it chatting about the new novel and that very first idea for The Secret of the Brighton House.
When I had my third child back in 2009, she was one of those babies that you read about that don't sleep. And she didn't sleep for more than, I think, about 4 hours in a row until about 15 months. So I basically went a little bit mad over those months because I never had any sleep. And it was a really difficult time. I had 3 very young children and I was really struggling. And fortunately, it was picked up by the health visitor and then my doctor, and I ended up getting some treatment for what they saw as like a mild postnatal depression. And I always thought at the time, I will write about this one day, because this has been such an interesting experience, just feeling so knackered all the time. And when my debut novel came out and is about a sort of mother-daughter relationship, my second book, which wasn't published, is also mother-daughter. So I kind of thought, that whole theme of postnatal depression and postnatal mental health, I thought was an interesting one to write about. And then when I was looking for ideas for this novel, I ended up watching a documentary about a guy who had never met his mum. She died when he was very, very small, and what happened to him. And that was a kind of similar experience to what had happened to me. But I thought, that particular documentary I thought was really fascinating, and it would be even better if I wrote it as a mother-daughter rather than mother-son relationship. So it was kind of it was always there, but just seeing that documentary, I thought, actually, this is a really good topic to write about. So in fact, it all came out. I watched the documentary at about 5:30 in the morning for about 40 minutes. And that was one of the rare times that I had a free morning. And by 11 o'clock, I'd written a kind of outline of what the novel could look like. And it has changed since then a bit, but fundamentally it's the same book I wrote. I've spent about 4 hours putting together.
How tricky is it to mine so much of your own, well, I guess trauma, really? Trauma with relationships, trauma with postnatal depression, with your child not sleeping, and you've got to revisit that for the space of 4-ish months while you're writing a first draft.
Yeah, I think that it was difficult, I think more for my debut than this one, because that was far closer to home. What's actually in The Secret of the Brighton House is not very much of me at all. Just that feeling of feeling a bit discombobulated after you've had a baby. But it wasn't necessarily that traumatic what happened to me. Certainly what happens to the character is very, very different. So no, I don't think with this book, it hasn't been particularly traumatic on a personal level, although what happens to this character is very difficult, and I had to do a lot of research around it, and reading some of the stories of what happens to other women in those circumstances was just heartbreaking. And it's not a topic we talk much about. And in some ways, there's a feeling of, maternal mental health that is a kind of a bit of a taboo subject. So it's interesting to talk about these things and bring them out into the open, I think.
It's interesting. Normally when I chat to an author, we try and pick apart like everything that happens while you get your outline down. But for you, it happened in a whirlwind 4 hours. So how did it all present itself to you? What did you know that went into that outline? How much of the story was covered?
Well, actually, most of it. And there's one of the twists at the end came to me actually while I was writing it. But yeah, most of it. I always thought I would write another book in dual timelines because that's what I'd done with my debut. So I always thought there would be a present day situation with a woman who is pregnant and worried about her pregnancy, and then something in the past. And so actually when the documentary was called Irene's Ghost, and when I watched that, I thought, yeah, this is it. This could be a very changed version, but there's this idea that there's someone in the present day who's investigating what happened in the past, but it's also impacting on their current situation. So yeah, it came so quickly, and nothing has ever happened like that with a book before or sadly since. And
although you said that, what happens to the character is nothing like what happened to you, this still how are you making that character real? With like bits of you, I know it's a completely different thing, but still, it's about a woman and a woman, and there are echoes of childbirth that run through it. What are you doing to make her character real and authentic, but different to you?
So I read lots of first-hand accounts of postpartum psychosis, which is what my character suffers from, and everyone has a completely different experience of that. So I read all these different accounts and kind of thought, I picked up little bits of things that different people had done and created them for this particular character, particularly thinking about who she was. So she's a mum in 1974. She's a working class woman who works in a upholstery factory. So she's absolutely obsessed by sewing. She's always sewing dresses. So when her grip on reality starts to waver a bit, a lot of it is focused around her sewing, and she's literally picking apart things that she's sewing, and that's how she's beginning to lose a grip on reality. That one of the early reviews, which has come out since, has said that they really felt that I'd had first-hand experience of postpartum psychosis, which I don't, but it's really heartening that reader felt that, because it's really hard to write in the first person about a character who is going mad, because of course it's such a unique experience. But yeah, I think it's just putting yourself in that character's shoes, really.
Let's talk about the twist that you mentioned, not about the twist, but about how you arrived at it. So you had planned out quite a lot of this novel, and yet like a brilliant, complete change occurs to you. What do you remember about the moment where that twist was presented to you?
Well, I wanted the character to suffer from postpartum psychosis, which is kind of part of what the character in the present day is finding out. But I thought it's got to be something more than that. And so I was sort of thinking about what could happen in those scenarios. And it was just really doing some of the research about what happened to some of these women, particularly women who suffered in the before the 90s, really. I think from the 90s onwards, we became much better at treating mental health and maternal mental health. But before that, people did tend to be incarcerated in mental health hospitals or asylums. Certainly asylums were still around in the early 90s, which is pretty shocking, really. So it was really understanding what could have happened to that character and going from there. So it was quite a slow reveal to me, if you like. It wasn't a kind of flashbulb moment.
And is it one of those things where it felt like everything's been leading up to it in the story. You just didn't know. It was like it was kind of all happening behind the surface.
Yes, I think so. And so when I went back to kind of put in a few clues about what eventually is revealed has happened, it was very obvious that some of those clues were already there. I just hadn't spotted them as a writer yet.
Oh, it's amazing when that kind of thing happens, isn't it? You mentioned research and having to go away and reread stories and read other people's experiences. I mean, how on earth do you, when you've got an outline and when it is, it's all come to you in this lightning bolt of inspiration, how do you know what you need to look at, where you should start with research?
Well, so I really wanted to read lots of first-hand accounts of women with postpartum psychosis. And there are lots of medical books, fortunately, with that. And they start off obviously quite dry because they're written by scientists, and then you get onto the first-hand accounts, and they're just incredibly moving. So I read a couple of books like that. There's also books that women themselves have written about their experiences, some of which are more scientific than others, but they're all really interesting because it's a general term, postpartum psychosis, but everyone has such a different experience. It was some, and there are obviously novels out there. So The Yellow Wallpaper is about that, and there's quite a few old and new novels written about this topic. So it was really interesting doing the research, and I think that's kind of my favourite part of the novel writing process, really, whether it's historical research into the time that you're setting the book or just into the topic itself. I really enjoyed digging around and asking people questions. I think it was less with this book, but certainly with my debut, I drew a lot on my own personal experience. And I had the idea for that book when I was clearing out my late mother's house. And I'd had a really bad relationship with her. And when I was clearing out her house, I thought, gosh, imagine if I find something here which kind of shows why she was so difficult. And I didn't, sadly, but I was writing a book at the time. And I thought, actually, that would be perfect for a start for a novel, that you've got this estranged mother, you're clearing out a house and suddenly you find something. And so I wrote a book which starts with a woman clearing out her estranged mother's house, and she finds something. So that I really, I would just imagine myself back in my mum's flat and how I felt when, not that I found anything, but how I felt while I was there and all those emotions. So I think we all mine our own personal experience to a sense. And certainly with my with writing this book, when I had my third child, I would often take her to hospital, thinking there was something wrong with her, even though there wasn't. And I think that was part of my own sort of slight losing touch with reality. And I do remember sitting in waiting rooms with her, just being like beyond exhausted and really confused about everything that was going on. So I mined those experiences a bit for this book.
You said that with the outline, it did change as you were going, not a tremendous amount. Was it a surprise that your characters did toe the line and do what you wanted them to do? What instances were there when they did try and take you off course, apart from the twist?
They didn't take me off course that much with this book, which is quite interesting. It kind of that those kind of 4 or 5 hours of just writing this outline, and this character would do this, and then this would happen. It stuck, really quite firmly to that. There were definitely bits and pieces that changed, like about the setting and what they would have done, because even though the 70s is not that long ago, things were quite different. But no, it more or less stayed to that, apart from that kind of final twist. But in other books that I have written, certainly the one I'm writing now, the characters keep doing crazy stuff and I'm kind of running to catch up with them. So this was quite a straightforward book to write in that way.
And let's talk about the second book, which wasn't published, no? This is the second published novel.
Yeah, so this will be the second published novel, but I wrote another book, and I know, like many authors, I had that difficult second novel that no one liked, so that is still somewhere on my hard drive, and I don't know whether it'll ever see the light of day, but I really enjoyed writing it at the time.
How was it to pick yourself up again? So you've got such the high of being published, and then you're told that the second one's not going to be published. You've dedicated so much time and effort into it. What was it like trying to go again?
Oh, it's really gutting actually when I was told. My agent said to me, this is not something I can sell or we can use. And I think what it turned out to be is I'd written it in a bit of a vacuum. I wrote it while I'd finished my debut and I was going out to entering competitions and trying to get an agent. And I wrote this other book in that time. And it was lockdown, and I think I was trying to cheer myself up. So I wrote something which was actually quite jolly, even though it had quite dark bits in it. There was a bit of a romance, and it just didn't fit with my first novel at all. And so I kind of got that out of my system. And then I was really sad about it. But I had already started writing The Secret of the Brighton House by then. And my agent said, I think I'd written 5,000 words. And my agent said, well, how soon can you deliver that to me? And I thought, oh my God, probably like 6 months. And I think it took me longer than that in the end because, life gets in the way. But yes, I did deliver it, and then she managed to go out and she sold that almost straight away. And they also bought the rights to my debut and then a third book, which I'm writing at the moment. And I kind of learnt the lesson with the third book, and I'm trying to write, because publishers like you to write a similar kind of book in a similar format, but obviously different topic. So I'm following that this time.
How much? Yeah. So just picking up on that, how much has that experience changed the initial ideas that you have for novels, maybe the way that you start them without an agent's input? Has any of that changed because of that experience?
Yeah, what I've realised is that although it is the author who is doing the writing, it's a bit of a team effort. And so when you write your debut, it's just you're just writing what you want to write. But when you write, once you're in contract, you need the input from the agent and the editor to make sure that they're happy. And I think I'd gone away and written what will be my third book, but the fourth one I've written. And they didn't really like the first draft. And I think really all I'd given them was a paragraph synopsis, and I went away and wrote it. And now I'm realising you actually just need to give a lot more detail so that everyone is happy. So you go away and write something that they're really happy with. So yeah, I have appreciated now that it's very much a team effort and not just me sitting alone in the dark at 5 o'clock in the morning.
So just picking up on some of the strange minutiae of being a published author. So you had success with The Girl in the Maze, and now it's being re-released as The Girl in the Midnight Maze. Just talk us through what you know of that decision.
Oh, so basically my first novel, The Girl in the Maze, came out in November 2021, so 3 years ago. And of course, it was like hugely exciting. It was with a very small publisher called Agora, which was part of PFD, the agents. And it came out, and then a couple of months later, they really basically decided to shut down Agora. And they'd said to me, oh, we want to have your second book. And then they kind of reneged on that. And they said, no, actually, we're closing down the company. So the rights for The Girl in the Maze reverted back to me at some stage in 2022. So essentially then I had a self-published book, which hadn't been what I'd kind of obviously set out to do. But my agent was great and resold the Girl in the Maze to Lake Union with my debut, with The Secret of the Brighton House, and then a third book. And they wanted me to rewrite The Girl in the Maze, really because they want to also target the US market. And the first chapter of The Girl in the Maze is a woman in the 1930s doing a self-abortion. And that doesn't obviously sit very well with the US market. So I had to start with a completely different first chapter and remove much of that. And the interesting thing was that things had really changed, I think, between 21 and 2024, in that there's some abuse which happens in The Girl in the Maze. And I had written it from the abuser's perspective. And this was kind of pre-Me Too. And I think it was felt really inappropriate to be writing it from the abuser's perspective in 2024. So that has all been changed as well. So I think it is a better book as a result of the changes made. But it was an interesting process having to rewrite my debut. And I spent about 3 or 4 months doing that.
How much do you think everything that you've been through in the last few years as an author in, having kind of a 2-book deal, which then doesn't happen and the rights come back to you. And then your second book can't be sold by your agent. So you need to write another thing. And then you manage to get your first book out again, but you need to change quite a substantial portion of it because the world moves on and because it's not as easy as I think it's all made out. How much does that set you up as an author? Like to go forward with everything else that you've got going on from a real place of strength?
Well, I think it makes you really grateful to have anything. So the fact that I have a book coming out, I'm just like, wow, this is just the most exciting thing. But I think also, in some ways, I enjoy the writing process so much that obviously I write to be published, but I think I would still do it even if I wasn't going to be published, just because just telling stories and putting a story together and watching the characters come to life is just such a wonderful thing that I think I would do it anyway.
And that is it for this week's episode of Writer's Routine. Thank you so much to Cathy Hayward for coming on the show. You can get a copy of the new novel. Use the Writer's Routine store over on our bookshop.org page, uk.bookshop.org/store/Writer's Routine. It's a lot. I'll stick the link in the episode notes wherever you're listening. Also there, you can find ways to support the show on Patreon and Ko-Fi. You can get in touch at writersroutine.com and make the most of our collaboration with Faber Academy. They are sponsoring the show this week. Their flagship writing a novel course is back. Find out more in the new year. faberacademy.com/writing-a-novel. The link is wherever you're listening. Have a very Merry Christmas. I will see you in 2025 with more behind the scenes chat with the best authors around. Until then, have a brilliant holiday break and I'll see you soon.